The number is so outrageous, it's very hard to believe, because numbers this high just start to lose all meaning.
245% tariffs on Chinese imports.
Because escalating US tariffs from 10% to 20, then to 54, then to 104, then to 145, and now presumably to 245. That's for all intents and purposes only a few steps away from declaring infinity tariffs, to which the only rational reply is to say, oh yeah? Well then we're tariffing you infinity plus 1. But even a mind-boggling 245% tariff on Chinese goods, if true, it would mean more than tripling the cost on everything that comes into the United States from China, which, for businesses who might spend months or years building reliable supply chains, would represent a seismic overnight shift. So you can understand the fear factor here. And considering the US bought close to $500 billion worth of Chinese goods last year, well, that's a major line item that just got a whole lot bigger, right? But it's not entirely true. Don't get me wrong, 245% is a real tariff applied by the US on China, just not in the way people thought. We can trace the confusion back to a White House fact sheet published on April 15th that was actually primarily about critical minerals and firming up the US supply chain. But buried down near the bottom, a nod to Liberation Day tariffs that spurred more than 75 countries to reach out to discuss new trade deals. It goes on, except for China, which retaliated, before noting, for the first time I've ever seen, that China now faces up to a 245% tariff on imports to the United States as a result of its retaliatory actions. A tariff this high would make trade with China very difficult.
It would be more than enough over time to pretty much bring trade to a halt.
But as debilitating a move a 245% tariff on Chinese goods would be, it fits into a pattern, right?
Punishing tariffs on Canada, China, and Mexico.
China retaliated immediately, a 15% tax on U.S. coal, 10% on U.S. crude oil.
A 34% tax on imports from China.
34% that takes effect on all U.S. goods.
Additional 50% retaliatory tariff on China.
Retaliatory tariffs of 84%.
Tariffs on China to 145%.
Tariffs on American goods to 125%.
In this protracted back and forth, China would have the final word, hitting back with that 125% tariff, but also issuing a statement. Even if the US continues to impose even higher tariffs, it would no longer have any economic significance and would go down as a joke in the history of world economics. If the US continues to play a numbers game with tariffs, China will not respond, which was understandable because never mind 245, even at 145 or 125 or even 50% tariffs, the vast majority of companies out there aren't making any profit.
Well, there is no profit margin. It's just impossible because your price becomes so much higher than the prices of your competitors or the price that a consumer is willing to pay. Tariffs under 50% will tend to squeeze profit margins. Tariffs above 50% will tend to end all trade.
But despite the vague and provocative use of 245% in the White House fact sheet, there are some very important words that are easy to miss. China now faces up to a 245% tariff.
The first Trump administration was defined in some ways by the trade war with China.
This is adding to tariffs that were there during the first administration that were largely kept by the Biden administration and have been notched up a couple times under the current Trump administration.
So these aren't the first tariffs China's facing?
Yes, the 245% referenced in the White House fact sheet. That's not a new tariff. It's simply the highest tariff within an enormous range of tariffs that have been high for a long time. For example, toys, they're tariffed at 145%. Children's books, they're actually tariffed at 0%. And smartphones, among a very lucrative class of items, recently granted an exemption, they're tariffed at 20% right now. But at the extreme end of the spectrum, there are two classes of goods facing a 245% tariff, which is because of a mix of old and new tariffs: syringes and electric vehicles.
The U.S. basically wanted to close off its market to Chinese electric vehicles to allow more space for a domestic electric vehicle industry to take hold. Syringes are a little different. It turned out that in the pandemic, a shortage of syringes kept the U.S. from vaccinating as fast as it otherwise could.
So did Trump just levy a 245% tariff on China? No. And in fact, it's the Biden administration that increased certain tariffs on China that Trump has since added to. The point is, 145% is the right number when you count new broad-based tariffs on China applied during Trump's second term. Anything higher than that takes a longer trade history into account and is very much product-specific. But does it even matter? Tariffs anywhere near this high all have the same effect, and that is to all but erase the benefits of trade, period. Trump's position is that China needs to make this right.
Hundreds of billions of dollars a year they'd make on us on trade. I have great respect for China, but they can't do this.
The ball is in China's court. China needs to make a deal with us. We don't have to make a deal with them.
And though anything is possible with Trump, this doesn't appear to be a fight he wants to be seen losing.